Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Holly Foltz, and I am a senior CSM with LMN, Landscape Management Network. I would like to start by introducing our partner and colleague, Monica Muir. Monica Muir is a QuickBooks solution provider and has worked with hundreds of LMN customers in helping them select the right version of QuickBooks to suit their business needs, and by providing expert accounting advice through her consulting advice. During our presentation, we will have the opportunity for Q&A. Please ask your questions through the questions or chat section found in the GoToWebinar meeting window. Please state whether the question is for LMN or if it's for QuickBooks. I will start us off by highlighting the key differences between LMN Pro and LMN Basic, with Monica's presentation to follow. Pro versus Basic. Which one is best for you? First, we will start with what is the difference between the two subscriptions. Both subscriptions include budget, estimating, time tracking, and scheduling. The difference between the two is that the Pro subscription includes photo and file storage, as well as invoicing. During the next few slides, I will showcase these features to show why they are so valuable. What's the deal with Pro? The upgraded subscription provides the capability to upload photos to the CRM and estimating files. With the release of our CRM app last October, which is available for both Pro and Basic subscriptions, our Pro users can take photos that will be stored under the CRM app, as well as the CRM web version. These photos and files are a great reference for job specs, site maps, and to store design files. The benefit of Pro is that these photos and files will be shared in a central hub versus storing in multiple places. In addition to our CRM files, your foremen have the capability to view files and photos and can take photos from the field. Commonly shared files and photos include work orders, site maps, and planning planners. Your crews can not only view files and photos from the field, they can also take them. Their photos will be stored in 3 places to reference: under the foreman's timesheet, the job and element time, and in the CRM. Timesheet photos can be used for quality assurance rather than sending a project manager to site. In some circumstances, a photo from your crew of job progress of completion may be sufficient. They also can be used as an opportunity for revenue. I have worked with several companies that encourage their teams to take photos of potential enhancement work. This is a great tool and time saver. Crews are on site anyway. They can take photos, provide notes, and your sales team can propose new work to the client. Photos for snow are a no-brainer. Operators can use to document site conditions, report damage for insurance and liability purposes. We have discussed photo and file storage. Now I will highlight a few key benefits of invoicing with LMN Pro. First and foremost, if you do hourly or per occurrence work, then LMN Pro is the right subscription for you. Gone are the days of gathering paper timesheets, scraps of paper to identify how and what to bill your customer. With LMN Pro, you can set up jobs to generate an invoice from hourly work and by field crews marking services as completed. You can also set up your monthly contracts to run based on a contract schedule. If you have mixed billing for different services, some services are billable extras where others are included in the contract, you have the option to add extras to monthly invoice or bill separately. For cash flow, many customers bill extras upon completion or on the 15th of the month. So that's the deal with Pro. If you are curious as to what subscription may be best for you, I would encourage you to visit our plan and pricing page available at golmn.com. From that page, complete our quick survey. Based on your answers, our survey tool will make a precise recommendation with reasoning on what subscription is best for you. I would like to thank you all for your time, and before I hand the presentation torch over to Monica, we will pause for 2 minutes to see if there are any questions from our listeners. Okay, looks like we have a question for LMN. For Pro versus Basic, what's the difference with what I can sync to QuickBooks? All right, well, thank you for your question. The difference between what you can sync to QuickBooks is invoicing. So with Basic, you're unable to generate invoices, whereas with Pro, that you're able to generate invoices and sync them directly to QuickBooks. Okay, it looks like we have another question here for LMN. I already invoice out of QuickBooks with memorized transactions. Why would I need Pro? Okay, another great question. Thank you for asking. With LMN Pro, you can certainly continue to use your memorized transactions. The real benefit is capturing those monthly invoices that you would like to either add the billable extras to. So should you like to present it on one invoice, it can be used for that purpose. The beauty with LMN Pro is for that hourly or that per visit, per occurrence work, billable extras that you don't have to track separately. It's all set up within the software to track for you. So you can continue with your memorized transactions and just use LMN Pro for those billable extras or use together. We have another question that's come in. What can I do to incentivize my crews to take photos? This has come up a few times during some of our academy classes, and every company is different. Some companies will give a bonus on work that was sold to the customer based off of the crew that took the photo to provide to their sales team for the enhancement work. Other companies use these photos for marketing purposes, so whoever gets the most likes on Instagram, as an example, would be rewarded however the company determines. So there's different ways that you can strategize on what you can do to incentivize your crews to take photos. All right, so I will hand over the presentation torch to my colleague and friend, Monica Muir. Monica Muir, thank you for joining us today. Please go ahead and start your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Holly. I'm glad to be able to be on board. I want to welcome everyone onto this call, so I'm really excited to be able to do this with Holly. I love the LMN product. I think it does so many things really well that QuickBooks does not. But today I want to focus on looking at what QuickBooks is best for your company with the emphasis on your company. So I'm going to take a look at where you want to start. I'm going to give you ideas to consider. And as you can see, there's a lot of QuickBooks options. So I want to talk a little bit more about what comes with some of those different options as you're thinking about some key deciding factors. I am going to have a real focus on job costing, because to me that's very important in the landscape world, and especially to work with LMN. And then kind of intermixed through here, I will talk about some workarounds. So if a product doesn't do what you want, what are some options maybe that you might do? So where to start? It really is going to be, starting with as simply as what do you need your product to do? And I would say maybe non-negotiables. And then what would you like ideally? And realize that unfortunately you don't have a genie that can give you everything that you want. You are going to have to pick and choose. And I'm also going to say that, again, coming back to the emphasis on you and your company, this is not what your CPA is telling you to use, not what your buddy is telling you to use. You need to think about, what is important for your company, and that's not always the same as as I've got clients in just about every version of QuickBooks there is. So, everyone has a reason for why they are using the one that they are. And I just want you to make one that's the best fit for you. So some things to consider is, what are the what are tasks that you need to be able to do? Just a side note here, not all versions of QuickBooks actually let you do payables. There's other ways that you end up handling your expenses. How many people need access? A lot of times this is a real simple way to eliminate some of your choices as you move up to the line. And in the products, then you'll find that more people have access. And then, but what do they really need access to? And sometimes it's, do they need access to QuickBooks? And if so, what part? But if you give them access to QuickBooks, how much do you need or want to control permission? What they can do when they get in the software. And obviously, the more people who have access to QuickBooks, the more you want to be able to control who can do what, who can see what. Do you want to track profitability of divisions? Again, this is not available it's available in most versions of QuickBooks, but not all of them. So if that's important, that's another relatively easy decision. Do you need to track inventory? I would say most of my landscape clients do not. You buy for the job, and maybe you do buy for 2 or 3 jobs, but inventory is an easy area where you can go wrong very quickly, and it's not an easy fix to fix. But I do have some clients that have garden centers, so obviously they do need to track inventory. So things to consider. Do you need to track sales reps? Again, that's not a feature in all versions of QuickBooks. And what about, what do you need to be able to do when you're not in the office? So in terms of remote access, and for others, again, then who needs to be in, who needs that remote access, and what do they need to be able to do remotely? So it may not be everything. It just might be a couple key things you need to do, and maybe they can stay outside of QuickBooks and do something else remotely. So when you think about reporting, again, this is a big area where I see the products start to differentiate among themselves. And, when it comes to some of the job cost reports, so do you want to see an estimated versus actual? I'm assuming most of you want to see your job profitability, right? That's kind of the name of the game here. What about labor costs? What types of reports do you want to be able to see? And I am going to spend some time talking about this later. And so you're going to find quite a variation as far as what is available in the different products and what you can actually see or not see when it comes to looking at the job cost for the labor. What about materials? To what extent, do you need to be able to track? How detailed do you need to be? Are you doing time and materials invoicing? Holly mentioned that you can get the unbilled time certainly coming over in LMN, which I think is great. But you need to track what you have on order. Do you want to track, where are you dollar-wise on the job? I know I have clients that do want to track that. And what about, I did the book for a landscaper years ago, and I was part-time, so I didn't know what, sometimes bills came in, I didn't know if they were for a job, or if I did, not which job. So sometimes this is a nice report to make sure that all costs that belong to a job get allocated to the job, especially if you're doing on time and materials invoicing, and just being able to make sure that invoices are getting out the door. So again, these are just ideas to consider. Maybe some of these aren't important to you, but they are to others. So again, this is just kind of a list to get you started. So as you can see, we have a lot of different versions. I would basically put them into 2 camps, the QuickBooks Online and the QuickBooks Desktop versions. And I'll give you the Cliff Notes. So some of you may know that when you were taking an English class, maybe there was a book that got assigned, you didn't feel like reading the book, you went and found the Cliff Notes, right? So if you can't stay on for the entire call, here are the Cliff Notes for QuickBooks, but I hope you can, because I do go in depth on some of these items here. But for job costing, the desktop product still has it, hand over fist over QuickBooks Online, especially the PC versions. I'll talk about what differentiates between Mac and the PC products when it comes to job costing. So they are still very, very strong when it comes to that in comparison. LMN does not sync with the Mac, so we'll talk about if you have a Mac, what are your options for using LMN with QuickBooks, and you do have options. When you move up to QuickBooks Premier or Enterprise, then you actually get to pick an industry that is more specific to your needs. So they have a contractor's edition, which is what most of my landscape clients actually use. And I always double check. I was just working with a client yesterday and they had Enterprise installed, but no one had put them into the contractor's edition. So that is just almost like a flip of a switch, but it does give you additional reporting capabilities. In the US, Enterprise actually comes in 3 different levels: silver, gold, and platinum. And the gold level actually has been a better deal for many of my clients who are in QuickBooks Pro and Premier, because gold included the payroll. So by the time we totaled up their annual payroll costs, then Enterprise sometimes costs less. So it's always good to run the numbers. In Canada, payroll is always separate, and the additional, like in the Platinum Edition, that's where you get into your inventory. Those are all separate add-ons when you get into Canada. Don't ask me why Intuit does things differently in the 2 countries, but they do. Excuse me for a minute. Enterprise does come in monthly. It's monthly only in Canada, and you can do monthly or annual in the U.S. And a lot of times you'll find that there may be a first-year discount that you can do, but also available through me as an Elite QuickBooks Solution Provider is you can get a lifetime discount on the Enterprise subscription. So always worth coming through me, and I can always get you the first-year discount as well if that you decide that's better for you. Obviously, what a lot of people like about QuickBooks Online is its online access, right? Kind of a no-brainer there. But there are ways, if you really do need the functionality of the desktop or you want the functionality of there, I'll talk about there's multiple methods that you can use so you can have that online access. I also have a page that I set up, so I do have a chart that compares these products, and I have videos that show you what you get in Premier that you don't get in Pro, or what you get in Enterprise that you don't get in Premier. Online's always changing. I can't keep up with that one, it seems like. And I do have an article on what's new in the 2020 products of QuickBooks. And just a quick note, if you were in 2017, you've probably been getting alerts that you will need to do something before the end of May. And I can guarantee on June 1, some of those features do not work, so you don't want to wait until then. You're getting busy now anyhow, so probably this is a good time if you need to do the upgrades. So an easy way, again, to start which product would be better for you. With QuickBooks Online, it's one subscription per company. For most of you, that's probably not a big deal. There are some of you that do have more than one company, so you need to factor that in when you're starting to look at which one you want. When you're in the desktop products, there's no restrictions on how many companies you have. So you can have a whole bunch, and I do have some clients that do. And if you are in Enterprise or the accountant's version of Premier, you can actually have 2 company files open at the same time, which comes in handy because sometimes funds move back and forth between the companies. So it's easier sometimes when they're both open. And if you are in Enterprise, you can actually run a P&L for your multiple companies. So in essence, it will open up each company file and run the P&L, and then you get the results over in Excel. So the left side would be your chart of accounts, which is typical for a P&L, and across the top would be your different companies. You can also do the balance sheet that way, and there's probably 1 or 2 other reports that you can run that way in Enterprise. The number of users, as I mentioned before, is going to be an area where things start to change. And so if you're in Simple Start, there's only 1 user. That's all you're going to do, and it is meant to be very simple. If you are in any of the other levels of QuickBooks Online, you'll find that permissions are set by type. And so if you're in the Essentials, you can have up to 3 users, so you can actually give someone time only or payments only if you wanted to. And then if you bump up to Plus, which is, I would say, for most of my landscape clients who do use QuickBooks Online, Plus is where they are. You can also just have someone have access to reports only, but they can't actually do any transactions. Sometimes that's a good thing. If you are in, they did come out with an advanced version so you can go up to 30 users. So obviously you need to be able to do a lot more with permissions, so they do have more customizing that you can do in advance. And I'll show you screenshots so you can kind of see what these look like. When you get over into the desktop, they actually do it by area versus, by type of user. So in the Mac, both Mac and Pro, you can have 3 users, and for the most part, I would say these products are basically the same. Permissions is one area where they differ. So the Mac has 8 areas, and you either give them access to it or you don't. Like they can do accounts receivable or they can't, or they can do payables or they can't. It's real basic in that respect. When you get into Pro and Premier, you can actually start to do more within those areas of what they can or can't do, and I'll show you a chart that you can see. Enterprise has all of the others beat hands down when it comes to how much you can restrict who can do what. So again, I'll show you a screenshot so you can just see how granular you can be when it comes to setting permissions. So here's an example from QuickBooks Online, the Plus level. So you can see you've got reports only and time tracking only. And if you go into advanced, now you see you can pick up a custom user, a standard user, whether or not they're the company admin. And here are the basics that we talked about before: reports only, time tracking only. But if they're a custom user, now you can start to do a little bit more. So maybe they can actually do estimates and invoices. They don't have access to banking. They're not going to have access to any of the expenses, but they can see their sales report. And then you also have the option of whether or not you can give a user the ability to manage descriptions. I would say in most cases that's going to be a no. You just want the owner, maybe 1 or 2 other people. So here's in Pro and Premier, they have the same level of permissions. So you can see that here's the different areas, and then like they can create transactions, or they can print the transaction, or they can do reports. You can give them access to all 3 if you want, like you see in the time tracking. Probably the only thing I would like to see changed is that they had the ability to change them but not delete transactions. So that's a tough call there, that you can, as far as restricting. When you get into enterprise, it looks very different. So you actually list your users and you assign roles to a user. So a user could have 5 or 6 roles if you want. What's nice is if you do have sales reps, then you can give them all the same set. Here's the sales rep role, and you just assign it to your sales rep. But you could, QuickBooks actually does come with roles already predefined. You can use those as is, or you can edit them. You can create your own. So you've got a lot of flexibility. And I just want you to see, this is obviously only a partial list. So I did, what if you have access to accounts payable? So accounts payable, notice here's a list of areas and activities within QuickBooks. And if the circle is blank, then it means they have no access. You have a half circle, they have some, and if it's a full circle, they can do everything they need for that particular area. Notice, first off, the others they even let you choose on a center. But notice here is I can decide whether or not they can view the list. Can they view balances? What can they do with that list? So as you go through these different things, you'll find different ways. You can restrict access. Banking, you can give them access to one account but not another. Reports, you can't name the report, but based on the areas that they have access to, you can start to restrict what types of reports they would see. So very, very powerful when it comes to restricting permissions. So let's talk about the ability to access your products online. So obviously QuickBooks Online, that's the only way you work with it, right? Nice, you can work with it on your computer, or the other nice thing is you can view on your mobile devices. So over on the desktop side, we'll look at the Mac. The Mac, because it doesn't work with LMN, then we're going to need to look at what are you going to do. You can still have your Mac, but you wouldn't use QuickBooks for the Mac. What are you going to do to get to a QuickBooks that works with LMN? So it does sync with your PC versions. It also syncs with QuickBooks Online. So you could have a PC version of QuickBooks sitting on another computer that you can get to, or it could go to QuickBooks Online, which is considered a hosted solution. It sits on another computer, and you log it. As long as you have internet access, then you can get there. you can convert to desktop or QuickBooks Online. We actually thought they were going to discontinue the desktop version of Mac a few years ago, but they couldn't. They figured they'd convert the Mac customers to QuickBooks Online, and they couldn't get enough converted. So you have your choice if you're a Mac lover, right? But and I do have some clients that will just have a PC computer in their office, and then that's what they use. Obviously, that's for a smaller operation company. If you are in the regular PC products, then you have a variety of methods that you can use. So one is just sometimes just letting the app solve for selected tasks. So like LMN does a great job on estimating. I love that they can do mobile time tracking because that wasn't available back when I did the bookkeeping. You can remote in to an office computer. If you're going to do this and you have multiple people in your office, a couple comments: make sure your monitors are off when you're remoting in. Make sure you have a Windows password so you don't have someone that decides that they can try to tap into your computer. If works, this probably is a really nice solution for a small company, but maybe you need 2 or 3 users to get in. That you can have multiple users using QuickBooks, but not at the same time. So whoever's working in QuickBooks blocks everyone out. But when you're done, then it syncs up to the cloud, and then whoever works into it next, it goes down onto their computer. They work on it, they lock everyone else out, and then they can upload back to the cloud. So again, for smaller operations, this might be, I forget what the price is, but it was really inexpensive. So that might be something to take a look at. A hosting company is where your QuickBooks file and would actually sit on another computer, and you pay per month per user. So QuickBooks Online actually is a hosted product, so you just need remote access. There would actually be, typically there's an icon on your desktop that you click on and it takes you to the server, and it just looks like you're working on a regular computer where you can work. So a lot of times, many times you can be up and running in a day, so that's really quick when you want to do that. You typically there's a lot of, it depends in terms of your pricing as far as what else you're using besides QuickBooks, but definitely an easy way to give you remote access and give you the power of your QuickBooks. Some of my larger clients actually have their own, what we call remote desktop server. Your typical network server stores your data. A remote desktop server actually has both the software and your data, and everyone there has to have their own Windows license, their own Microsoft Office license, and then of course they've got the QuickBooks, and maybe you've got a few other things. So it needs to be a beefy server for sure, so the price is a little bit more. A lot of times your IT person can set that up for you, so that is an option as far as getting remote access to your QuickBooks. So I'm going to pause here and see if we've got any questions.
Great, thanks, Monica. So we'll just give it a minute and we'll see if any questions come in. All right, Monica, we have a question for QuickBooks. I use QuickBooks Online and want to job costs. Can I easily switch to desktop?
You can switch to desktop. Realize that anytime you convert between desktop and online in either direction, that you are going to have an adjustment period. So there are limitations to the conversion process. So sometimes it works easy and sometimes it doesn't. So you do need to allow time, but you can go in either direction. Typically the clients I work with move from QuickBooks Online to desktop. So I do have, and I always let folks know where we know there are some limitations, so you know up front what to look for. And then if there's any other quirky things that come up, then we just deal with those as they are. But usually as far as the actual conversion, it typically works pretty quickly. It's just a matter of once you're in your QuickBooks, then deciding what works well and what doesn't. And in the interim, I always tell people, do not cancel your subscription until you've got things fixed in your desktop. You want to be functional, and you want to know what numbers you really needed to have. But yes, it's absolutely doable. And like I said, I've moved clients off of the online into the desktop.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Monica. We have another question. In order to incorporate time tracking for invoicing, do you have to use QuickBooks Payroll module? So I believe that's a question for LMN, and the answer is no. So you can have your users track their time in the field, so you get those actual hours against what you've estimated at a job or task level. Should you use a different payroll service, then you would use LMN's reports to export data that you can use for your payroll, should that be ADP or Paychex, et cetera. The invoice component is separate from the timesheets. So you would be able to send your invoices over separate from your timesheets. And Monica, we have another question for QuickBooks. Is it expensive or complicated to host QuickBooks on a server?
You know, I don't have the dollars for that. So in terms of if you're using a hosting company, they will typically vary depending on, I think Pro and Premier are probably about the same price. Maybe, I'm going to guess like maybe ballpark $40, $50 a month per user. Enterprise, and I'm sure this is all tied into licensing within it. Then the enterprise typically starts like around 60, 65. You know, sometimes they will charge extra for Microsoft Office. Sometimes there's extra for apps. I know one of the hosting companies I work with, there's no extra charge for LMN, which I think is great. So I can give you more information on that later if you'd like.
Okay, great. We do have another question asking whether or not the presentation will be available post the webinar. I don't have an exact answer for that, but I can share with you that the presentation will be available on the LMN site following the webinar. So if there's areas of the presentation that you'd like to revisit or the entire presentation, it will be available under our speaker series on golmn.com. And Monica, it sounds like I have a question for you. I am on a Mac and have a QuickBooks account through a remote desktop cloud and thinking of moving to online. Not
So
sure
you're
exactly what the question is there. Oh, there I see it. Can you clarify if I can use QuickBooks Online with my Mac and still use LMN for payroll and estimate syncing?
So you would use your Mac to remote into QuickBooks Online, and then you would use an LMN to sync with your QuickBooks Online is how you would work when you're on a Mac, if that's your current setup. Payroll
Okay,
we'll talk
so
about
that
as far as the payroll and time would work, but
awesome. That's great. So if, as we're answering these questions, if you do have follow-up questions or needed a little bit more information, please don't hesitate to just ask your questions through the question portal. I do have another question, and it is for Monica. Does QuickBooks Online have job costing reporting capabilities?
I'm going to say not really. And we'll talk about that more in depth as far as what you'll have and what you won't have.
Okay, thank you. In order to incorporate time tracking for invoicing, oh, I've already answered that question. Oh, it looks like we have one last question here. Client notes in LMN show on an estimate. So why aren't those notes exported to the QuickBooks estimate and the client's notes exported on invoices from LMN to QuickBooks? That's a great question. The client notes in LMN estimating are for your client. They're for a proposal. When you export the estimate over to QuickBooks, it's to be able to track your estimated costs for that estimate and or convert it into an invoice. So if you were to propose a proposal to a customer with notes and then export it to QuickBooks to propose an invoice for the customer to create an invoice, you would be sharing the same notes. So the reason why we don't bring them over is that your QuickBooks is your financial tool, and then your LMN estimating is the tool that you would use in order to propose the work to the client. And in regards to estimating with desktop, I believe if you do time and material work, I would just have to test that, that the notes would come over for time and material work only. So we'll just take a pause on the questions. We will have opportunity for questions at the end of Monica's presentation. We're, I believe, at about the halfway mark. So please continue, Monica, and let's learn more from you.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to start off with, when we look at, I'm going to focus now primarily on job costing. And so the first part is just talking about what can you do with the job. I know it sounds really basic, but there are differences I think you need to be aware of. So in QuickBooks Online, they actually have something called projects. You have to have either QuickBooks Plus or Advanced in order to be able to use that. And what I'm noticing is in terms of the product development on QuickBooks Online, this is where they're putting some of their energies. However, projects, that field is not available to LMN or the other apps. It's just not in the software for other apps to connect with. So it's nice, but it's, I guess, not ready for prime time. So that's an area where it falls short. You end up using a sub-customer, and that's what LMN can sync to in QuickBooks Online. And so I'll talk about the reporting that you can get. If you're in QuickBooks Desktop, jobs are available to the LMN, not a big deal, and you can have different jobs and nested jobs, so not an issue from that perspective, which is nice, except for the Mac. It doesn't sync to the Mac, as we mentioned before. And then, so estimating, as Holly had talked about, sending estimates over into QuickBooks. So we'll take a look at the differences in the online or desktop and if there are differences. So in the online version, for the estimate document that you have in the QuickBooks Online, you can either do an estimated cost or an estimated revenue. You can't do both. And LMN is going to send over the revenue and not your cost. So, which is fine because it makes it easy for you to take that estimate and then create an invoice based on that estimate. So, but you are going to have to decide what you do, or you can invoice in LMN and then use estimated cost in QuickBooks Online if you decide. So a workaround, not ideal, but that's kind of where it is. Not a big deal in QuickBooks Desktop. You can have both cost and revenue. And in fact, when you look at the different methods to sync LMN over to QuickBooks, you have an option to send all the cost detail over as well as the revenue. So it makes the job costing when you're looking at the reporting a lot easier to work with. In terms of labor costs, this is going to be, I would say, one of the biggest areas where these products really differentiate themselves, and it is probably the biggest reason why I have clients moving from QuickBooks Online into QuickBooks Desktop. So the payroll in QuickBooks Online actually is outside of QuickBooks Online. So, which makes it nice. You can do, as long as you have internet access, you can run payroll. And in the U.S., the QuickBooks Online has 3 different payroll products, Core, Premium, and Elite. And you can't track labor costs with the Core and Premium. You get into and for there, what they do is they assign a class to the employee if you use classes, and you have to be in Plus or higher to get that, but not the division. So, if you've got an employee that maybe sometimes switches, or like maybe did snow removal one day and spring cleanup the next, you're not able to adjust for that, and you definitely can have it specific to the job when you're in QuickBooks Online. And you can do a journal entry to kind of adjust for your labor costs, but again, it depends on who the employee is. It's not so bad when they did a big install job, but you get into snow removal or you get into the maintenance projects and they're not there for long, maybe it's more trouble than it's a lot of work. So, and the larger you are, the tougher that becomes. If you're in the Mac, the Elite Payroll does work with with the QuickBooks Online projects and not the sub-customers. So again, remember, LMN's not able to sync to the project, so you can't take advantage of this feature right now. So if you are in the Mac, they have the same limitation pretty much as QuickBooks Online. This should be QuickBooks. It's outside of the QuickBooks for Mac, not online. I apologize. But when you go ahead, so because it's outside of QuickBooks, They do the same thing as the class per employee, and you can't change it by division or job without it doing a journal entry. So, it's there. So it's definitely better than nothing. But, and we can do workarounds, and that's exactly what they are. And they can be time consuming sometimes. Payroll for the desktop, that can actually be inside your QuickBooks desktop. All the reporting is right there. There is an incredible amount of reports that you can run in QuickBooks desktop when it comes to payroll. All sorts of ways that you can slice and dice that. What I also like is that you can track to the task level or work area when it comes to QuickBooks. So you can really drill down and see, well, if a job went over, where did it go over, and start to get better with that and see just what your costs were. The labor is burdened, and I'll show you in a minute just how burdened it can be, which is great. And you don't have to really do anything extra. So I just love that it's there. It's very powerful. And as I mentioned before, this is probably the biggest reason I have folks leave QuickBooks Online and come over to the desktop, because labor costs are probably the biggest area of concern when it comes to the job costing. So LMN will send the time over into your QuickBooks, and it populates your timesheet. And having done these manually, I just love that you can have it like this. It's so simple when LMN can send it right over into QuickBooks. It's allocated by the job, what they did, it's got their wage taken care of, it's got their class or division, and all the time is right there. So great that it's there for you. Much simpler than you having to do it by hand. But you can take it a step further. So now if we go to create a paycheck based on their time, when we're in the PC versions of the desktop QuickBooks, this is what the employer see. This is not what your employee sees, so you don't have to panic. But notice here's their wage item, here's their rate, the amount of time that they spent at each location, and the class that they were in, and this would be the service item that syncs with your LMN cost code. All right in there, so it breaks it all out for you. And notice it's allocating the time there. And then here's where I ran a job profitability detailed report, and I drilled down on the lawn maintenance for this Natalie Chapman here. And I want you to see that I could tell that there was a paycheck. I could see the date. I could see the date of the paycheck, who the customer was, who the employee was. I can see their wage. If you're doing payroll in QuickBooks, you'd see in the U.S. the Social Security, the Medicare, and you'd have the unemployment filled out. If you are using something like ADP or Paychecks and you decide you want to job cost your labor, we have a workaround. We can either turn on the manual payroll and actually fill in what the rates are for Social Security, Medicare, and so on, or you can do something like a percentage. You're going to mark up their wage by 1% to account for the payroll taxes and workers' comp. So you've got a couple ways that you can go. But notice, for 30 minutes, 15 minutes, even an hour, you don't want to take the time to prorate, and QuickBooks just does it automatically for you. So I think it's a very powerful feature, and you figure on what your workers are going to be when you set up your budget, but workers come and go, pay rates change, people get raises, or next guy comes in for less, and most times you don't update budgets, but this gives you your actual cost then that you have on the job. If we take a look at job cost reports, then for QuickBooks Online, when you do an estimate in the online version, you're using your products and services. And there is no estimated versus actual report in QuickBooks Online. The workaround is to do a budget. Well, a budget won't use your products and services, it's using your chart of accounts. So now, although you had the estimate in LMN, now you've got to create a budget for that job in order to see a budget versus actual. So you can do that. Personally, I'm not a fan of having to do work twice. So I don't like that. But again, I've got clients at QuickBooks Online, so just know where the limitations are. They do have a project profitability, but again, that's using the project field that you're not able to tap into yet because it's not available in the software that LMN is able to use. You go into the desktop products. LMN also can use the sub-customer, and you can run a P&L for your sub-customer, but that doesn't include your labor costs. So now if you want to include the labor costs, you're going to have to do some sort of a workaround to figure out, what dollar amount you want to allocate to the job based on the amount of time worked. Maintenance crews, you probably aren't going to want to bother. Maybe your install projects are easier and you might do that. You'd have to decide. If you get into the desktop products, though, and there are no other job cost reports for sub-customer. That's it for QuickBooks Online. So they have you can do a budget versus actual, which most of you probably wouldn't do. You can do a P&L for the sub-customer and just realize your labor costs aren't there. If you are in the desktop, they actually have a group of reports under job, time, and mileage. So it's not just one report, there's a whole slew of reports that are in there. If you are in Premier or Enterprise and in the Contractors Edition, there's additional job cost reporting. And if you're in Enterprise, they have a work in process summary report, which is good if you do percent completion, and it's so much faster than if you had to do it by hand. And they have a committed cost report, and a committed cost report would be good for your larger projects. So it's saying that you've got if we have your estimates and we know what your actual costs are to date, but you're using purchase orders, so we know what you have on order but hasn't come in. You're using QuickBooks for your payroll, so you've got the hours in, but you haven't paid your crews yet. So now we actually get a column for unpaid wages. Doesn't include the labor burden, but at least it gives you an idea of the wage cost. To give you an idea of where you are, you're still on track cost-wise when it comes to evaluating your job progress. And then QuickBooks Online just will update periodically. So one of the advantages that QuickBooks Online has, or that Intuit likes, is they can just push out one update whenever they're ready. And so, some people like it when the updates come out. Every once in a while I hear rumblings about something that moved and people aren't happy with, but that's the way it goes. In the desktop versions, and you don't find there's not like a QuickBooks Online 19 and 20. So it just evolves. And the desktop, obviously, we have the years. So, and their new versions typically roll out the third week in September. But there are also security updates. So you decide when to install those update patches, unless you're in a hosted environment. And you decide when you upgrade from 17 to 18 or to 19 to 20. You get to make that choice when you're going to do the update. And with Premier and Pro, you can actually own, and Mac, you actually own those products. So you buy it, and Intuit will support it for 3 years. So you don't have to worry about any monthly or annual subscriptions unless you do the Pro Plus and Premier Plus, and then they're annual subscriptions. Most of my clients just buy the product and upgrade when they need to. Intuit will support 3 years. So as I mentioned earlier, 2017 is going to be sunset the end of May. So things like payroll, credit card processing, and emailing invoices and downloading bank transactions will no longer work. So again, you'll want to do something before you get busy. Enterprise is subscription only, whether you're in Canada or the U.S. In Canada, I think it's only monthly. In the U.S., you can choose between monthly and annual. And as I mentioned before, sometimes Enterprise actually is a better deal for people. So it's always worth running the numbers and see which one is a better deal for you. But even though it's subscription, that doesn't mean it's online. You still decide when you are going to upgrade. I've got clients still working in 18 and 19 right now that are using Enterprise. They just haven't bumped up to 2020 yet. And so which QuickBooks is best for your company? I'm going to say you need to determine your needs, and you're going to have to prioritize your wants, and then from there make a decision. The other thing as I mentioned before, I've got this page where I've got additional information. So if you really want to start to see where the differences are more so than what we did today, or want to go back and kind of check a couple things I mentioned, this is a place where you can go. I'm actually an elite QuickBooks solution provider, which means when it comes to buying the Intuit products, it's the lowest pricing you're going to get. So whether it's the Pro, Premier, Mac, QuickBooks Online, or an Enterprise, those are the best deals that you're going to get coming through me. Obviously, you get a great deal when you go through Holly and her team when you're dealing with LMN. So they have a very solid product So, but keep this in mind. So if you want to order your QuickBooks or get pricing on it, you can reach out to me. You can go to this website here, or you can email this address, and we can get you the information that's appropriate for you. So any questions?
Great, Monica. Thank you so much for your presentation. We're just going to, it looks like we have a few questions that have come in. And we'll start with, it's for QuickBooks. Does QuickBooks Desktop track labor costs from LMN without the payroll module?
Not without the payroll module, but if you don't want to pay for the payroll, there's a way to turn on the manual payroll. So if you want to use ADP or Paychecks, then you can go ahead and use them. But then we have a workaround using, so we still create a paycheck in QuickBooks so that you can get your labor job costed. But that's the only way. There is no cost associated with your employees until that check is cut in QuickBooks.
We have a user that's asked, can you share your comparison chart website again? So if you just want to circle back to your comparison chart, that would be tremendous.
Okay. One more.
Then we have a user that's asked how they can find out more about the manual payroll workaround. I would recommend that you contact Monica Muir directly.
Yeah. So there's it's my last name, Muir, MUIR, and ASSOC.com/LMN 2020.
Okay. That's great. Thank you, Monica.
Yep. And if we can go back to additional questions.
Then we have a question for LMN. Does LMN integrate with other accounting software like Sage 360? The answer is that we don't at this time. At this time, we have a partnership and solely integrate with QuickBooks. And another question for LMN. Does LMN have a recommended setup to integrate with QuickBooks? And the answer to that is yes, we do. I would recommend that you contact our help desk or a support team available live chat, by phone, or by email. The support team can provide you with some sample documents for how we would recommend you set up your chart of accounts, as well as your service items in QuickBooks and your cost codes. It's a fairly basic setup that we would recommend. It's not going to work for all companies. We do suggest that you customize it to work with your company. So should you like a little bit more detail, you can add that detail in. We have a question for Monica. Is there a hosting company you recommend or questions we should ask?
So for hosting companies, there's two in particular I really like. One is Ace Cloud Hosting. They are based out of India. I've worked with them before. They get high marks from all my peers. Their English was great, and the pricing was good. If you want someone that's close to that, another one that I really like is Recur 360 Hosting. They're based out of Oregon, and both of these companies use solid state servers, so that means that everything works faster on your computers. The nice thing about Recur 360 is they really didn't want to have like a ton of customers so they can provide better support, but they actually have staff there that used to work at Intuit, and they were at tier 3 when it came to enterprise support. So you don't have to worry. I had heard someone having issues that was trying to go into a hosted. They were trying to work with Right Networks, and Intuit kept pointing the finger at each other as to who was at fault for why they couldn't get things to work. So the nice thing about Recur 360 is you've got the hosting and the QuickBooks folks right there, so it's all in one place. But I'd say comparable pricing. Recur 360 does not charge for LMN. I think Ace Cloud Hosting does. I don't remember it's been a while since I looked at their proposals, but in terms of what to ask, you want to find out what's included. So they're going to include your QuickBooks, and you want to find out if it costs extra for Microsoft Office. In some cases it does. It does cost extra. Other cases it doesn't. Sometimes you can specify you just want, say, Outlook and Excel. So you can export out to Excel for reporting, and you can email your invoicing. So you want to find out about that. And then when it comes to Microsoft Office, are they looking at 365 or not? Which one are you working with, or which one do you want to work with? And then any other apps that you might happen to work with, you want to find out if that's okay. So again, the nice thing about both ACE and Recur 360 is that they will work with, I would say industry-specific apps. The one Right Networks that Intuit promotes is, I would say, much more restrictive as far as what apps they'll work with. They do work with LMN, that they finally got that added, but they tend to look at more generic. So I would say ACE Cloud Hosting and Recur 360. I have contacts at both, so if you're interested in either one, let me know. I'll give you the contact.
That's great. And Monica, can you just confirm the names of those? Was it East Cloud? Is that
ACE,
correct? Oh, ACE.
A-C-E. ACE, like
ACE,
ace
ACE
in the deck of
Cloud.
cards.
Okay.
ACE.
And then what was the second recommendation that you had made?
Recur 360.
Recur 360. And
Yeah,
then
they have,
what is your email address so users are able to email you should they have questions, or would they be able to access you through your website that you have listed here, Muir
yeah, I
Associate.com?
think they can get me from there, or the other way, it's my first name, monica.muir@muirassociate.com.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you. And it looks like we have a question for LMN. Is there a CRM that you recommend that works with QuickBooks that allows a workaround for integration with the LMN CRM for a more robust sales tracking system? So I'm not 100% sure if that would be for LMN or for QuickBooks, but LMN has the CRM, and then we're able to pull your client lists directly from QuickBooks. So in LMN currently, and that's when I say we pull your client list from QuickBooks, it's for new users that are looking to enable or implement our CRM. We can pull your active customers from QuickBooks. With QuickBooks, we can also pull over their job sites as well. And then in our tool, there's features that you can use to track the sales process. You can also use for marketing purposes as well as client follow-up. So if this user could just elaborate a little bit more on what specifically you were looking for there, I just want to make sure that I understood your question. I have another question for QuickBooks. Is it hard to bring payroll in-house? Currently, I use ADP and I'm considering switching. How can I make sure I'm accounting for everything, such as workers' comp, payrolls, tax, etc.?
So I would say two things. One, it depends on the skill of the people in the books. So for some, it's not a problem. They're very comfortable in payroll. If you're really not comfortable in payroll, maybe you want to keep it out. But when you set up payroll in QuickBooks, when you turn it on, QuickBooks actually has a wizard that they walk you through. So they make sure that you definitely pick up your state and federal taxes. The workers' comp in the PC desktop is an extra feature. You don't pay extra for it, but it's just a feature you turn on. So you can track workers' comp if you wanted to. And then, as far as the basic taxes and stuff, it's all there. And when QuickBooks, when you go to that wizard, it'll have you schedule your payments. So you've got some payments that are quarterly. You've got some payments that you need to make after every pay period or maybe on a monthly basis. So once you set that in, then QuickBooks has a schedule, and QuickBooks will actually alert you to when it's time to pay the payroll taxes and give you an alert. Sometimes what I'll suggest, and this is for the U.S., is that Intuit has a product called Assisted Payroll. So sometimes in the transition, I'll suggest you start with Assisted Payroll. You do the paycheck Intuit takes care of the tax filings for you. And I have clients that kind of stay that way. But if you decide that you are comfortable, you can always bring it in-house. So that becomes a happy medium, but like I say, there is a wizard that will walk you through. And then a lot of times I'll maybe recommend making some tweaks in there just from a job costing perspective. But no, so I won't say it's hard, but you just need to kind of pay attention.
Okay. That's great. And we have a follow-up from a user that had asked about the CRM. I'm just going to invite you to contact our support desk. I understand you had more questions about the sales process with our CRM. I'll say that we do not integrate with another software aside from QuickBooks. So at this time, that isn't something that we'd be able to do, but we're always open to ideas and suggestions and recommended partners. So please contact us at support@golmn.com. Now I have time for one more question, and then we'll be concluding this webinar. I'll provide you with Monica's access if you're looking to get in contact with Monica, as well as LMN. This webinar, as I mentioned earlier, will be available on our speaker series under our website, golmn.com, and it will be emailed to all of you post-webinar. I have a question for LMN, so this is the final question. We have 200 to 300 invoices a month. How many people are needed to stay on top of this invoicing workload, in your opinion? All right, so to answer this question, I would recommend that you have someone that's dedicated to the invoicing. It sounds like it's going to be for maintenance. There are plenty of reports that are available in Element to cross-reference to make sure that you have the appropriate information in order to invoice your customer. Usually there's a level of approval. In larger companies, there may be project managers that are responsible for the invoicing for their department. In smaller companies, it may be the owner, it might be a specific admin. There's reports that you can use to show you what is available to be billed and what's sitting for you, waiting for you for your invoices, depending on what type of schedule that you would like to run. You can also set invoices that are ready in a state of in review, so that way you can circle back when it's time to send out those invoices, have them all stored and ready for you versus going and looking at 300 invoices all at once. So I hope everyone enjoyed the webinar today. I wanted to say thank you to the attendees for signing up for this webinar, as well as to Monica. Monica, I always learn so much from our conversations and from hearing what's new with QuickBooks. So thank you very much. Thank you all for attending. Monica, if you can just share your email address once more.
Yes, it's monica.muir@muirassociates.com, and Muir is M as in Mary, U-I-R, and just abbreviated associates. And thank you, Holly. I appreciated being on the call with you today. So always great to work together.
Oh, my pleasure. And just to share LMN, if you have some more questions for LMN, please feel free to visit the sites that are presented on the screen right now and or email support@golmn.com. Thank you very much for your time. Take care, everyone.